All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another video with me. Welcome to Geopolitics with Ramin. In this video, I'm gonna go through a little bit about the some of the organizations that fought in the imperialist imposed war against Syria. These CIA-backed organizations and backed by the various allies of the United States in the region: Turkey, Israel, you name it, Jordan, whatever. Saudi Arabia, Qatar. And we're also going to go through some of the key factors to why the Syrian Arab Republic and the government of Syria collapsed, such as corruption, climate change, that is to say, drought, what else? Neoliberal reforms, and so forth. But I'm going to start with the organization. So, one of the most prominent ones was Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham it was part of the Jabhat al-Nusra. That's what it was in the beginning, which was an offshoot of Al-Qaeda. And its leader is Ahmad al-Shara, which is basically al-Julani, which is his nom de guerre. But anyway, we can go through shortly a little bit from Wikipedia about both the leader and the organization. So HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, also referred to as Tahrir al-Sham, is a Sunni Islamist political organization and militia involved in the Syrian civil war. It was formed on the 28th of January 2017 as a merger between several armed groups. Jaish al-Ahrar, Ahrar al-Sham, it's an organization I've heard about before. Jabhat Fateh al-Sham, Ansar al-Din Front, Jaish al-Sunnah, Liwa al-Haq, Nur al-Din al-Zinki movement. Al-Zinki movement became famous back in 2013 or 12, I believe, when they had kidnapped a Palestinian child. Believe he was between 15 to 18 or something like that. And there's a video of them decapitating him. And then the State Department trying to tone it down or whatever, the American State Department. Anyway, the unification process was held under the initiative of Abu Jabir Sheikh, an Islamist militant commander who had been the second emir of Ahrar al-Sham. HTS, along with the Syrian opposition groups, launched an offensive and toppled the Assad regime on December 8th, 2024, and now controls most of the country. Proclaiming the nascent organization as a new stage in life of the Blessed Revolution, Abu Jabir urged all factions of the Syrian opposition to unite under its Islamic leadership and wage a popular jihad to achieve the objectives of the Syrian Revolution, which he characterized as the ouster of the Ba'athist regime and Hezbollah militants from Syrian territories, and the formation of an Islamic government. After the announcement, additional groups and individuals joined. The merged group has been primarily led by Jabhat Fatah al-Sham and former Ahrar al-Sham leaders, although the high command also has a representation from other groups. The Nur al-Din al-Zinki movement split from Tahrir al-Sham in July 2017 and Ansar al-Din Front in 2018. The formation of HTS was followed by a string of assassinations of its supporters. In response, HTS launched successful crackdown on Al-Qaeda loyalists, which cemented its power in Idlib. HTS has since been pursuing a Syrianization program focused on establishing a stable civilian administration that provides services connects to humanitarian organizations in addition to maintaining law and order. Tahrir al-Sham's strategy is based on expanding its territorial control in Syria, establishing governance, and mobilizing popular support. In 2017, HTS permitted Turkish troops to patrol northwest Syria as part of a ceasefire brokered through the Astana negotiations. Its policies have brought into conflict with Huras al-Din, Al-Qaeda's Syrian wing, including militarily. HTS had an estimated 6,000 to 15,000 members in 2022. So, I'm trying to see here. Yeah, we can keep going a little bit. From 2017. Okay, so before I continue, so they say they had like split from Al Qaeda and become, I don't know, more moderate, I guess, which is nonsense because there are still videos out there of their respective high-ranking members overseeing or directly being involved in um, executions of people in very brutal fashions. The just because you put a suit and tie on a guy and trim his beard and hair, um, that don't take away their criminal past, right? So keep that in mind. Um, their leader Giuliani, he used to order car bombings and decapitations and whatnot. We have head choppers in charge in Syria right now. So, but anyway, and this Syrianization program um, sounds kind of strange to me. I don't know really what they say is focused on establishing a stable civilian administration to provide services connecting. The problem is that a lot of these guys, they're not really good at statecraft. That's their thing. That's not their thing. They're good at war. How to run a state, I don't know how they're supposed to. They don't have degrees in industrial economics and stuff like that. They're good at reading Qurans, though, and pick whatever verses from hadiths and the Quran in whatever shape and form it suits them. But that's about it. Anyway, from 2017 to 2024, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham gave allegiance to the Syrian Salvation Government, SSG, which was an alternative government of the Syrian opposition and the Idlib government. And there was infighting in Idlib between these various Islam groups. While the organization officially adheres to the Salafi school, the High Council of Fatwa of the Syrian Salvation Government, to which it's religiously beholden, consists of ulema from Asharit and Sufi traditions as well. In its legal system and educational curriculum, HTS implements Shafi thought and teaches the importance of the four classical Sunni madhab in Islamic jurisprudence. After the fall of Damascus, the SSG was replaced by the Syrian transitional government. From 2021 to the fall of Assad, HTS was the most powerful military faction within the Syrian opposition. The organization was designated as a terrorist group by the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2254, which classified the group's precursor Al-Nusra Front. Yeah, well, these resolutions and whatever, they really don't mean much. I mean, this guy had a $10 million bounty on his head, and yeah, I mean, I think they actually removed it, right? Which means it wasn't real in the first place. They didn't care. This is just bullshit symbolism from the so-called free world, right? Because these guys are good proxies, right, for the West. They're militant. They're ideologically very, convinced. I believe most of the foot soldiers are idiots, though, because they are nothing but geopolitical pawns. But whatever, useful idiots, basically. But anyway, I think this part is extremely important, though. The background, the history. Then we can call it a quits on HTS and move on perhaps to the Turkestan Islamic movement. Anyway. So, before becoming the Emir of Al-Nusra Front, Abu Muhammad... No, sorry, we're going to go talk about Ahmad al-Sharah, their leader. Before becoming the Emir of Al-Nusra Front, Abu Muhammad al-Julani started his military career in 2003, traveling from Damascus in Syria to Iraq, where he resisted the U.S. occupation of Iraq. He joined Al-Qaeda in Iraq and fought in the Iraqi insurgency against the American occupation. After his imprisonment by the U.S. military in 2006 and subsequent release by Iraqi government in 2011 during the Syrian revolution, Yeah, I don't know. This goes to show how much the United States has control in Iraq. By the way, everybody's accusing Iran for having like the most control in Iraq. I'm not saying Iran don't have a lot of influence in the country. I'm sure they do. But the fact that the Iraqi government released an Al Qaeda operative uh, to be used as a proxy or whatever, an agent in the Syrian civil war, if we want to call it that, goes to show how much America also has influence in the country. But anyway, Julani was tasked with establishing Al Nusra Front as Al Qaeda's official branch in Syria. Between 2011 and 2012, he coordinated with Abu Bakr al Baghdadi, leader of the Islamic State of Iraq, ISI, to expand Al Qaeda's branch in Syria. In April 2013, Baghdadi announced his group's expansion into Syria and declared the creation of the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, ISIL, and unilaterally demanded al-Nusra's merger into ISIL. Anyway, Julani denounced the move and maintained his bay'ah, which is basically a pledge of allegiance. I hope I pronounced that correctly, to Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda or Al-Qaeda Emir Ayman al-Zawahiri also denounced al-Baghdadi's announcement asserting that Syria was the spatial state of the al-Nusra Front. Zawahiri officially demanded the dissolution of the new entity and urged Baghdadi to withdraw all his troops from Syria. In a letter addressed to the leadership of ISIL and al-Nusra Front on June 2013, Ayman al-Zawahiri directly rebuked al-Baghdadi's moves by recognizing al-Nusra Front as the only official Syrian branch of the Al-Qaeda and demanded the dissolution of ISIL. So basically, their boy Julani had ties with ISIL, right? He was the emir, I believe, or no, second deputy, as far as I understand, of ISIL in Iraq. But he pledged allegiance to Al Qaeda later on. And there was like a power struggle between the two, and that's why Jabhat al-Nusra or Al Qaeda and ISIL split from one another. It had nothing to do with the amount of brutality that ISIL used or whatever, because there was this bullshit I remember from certain terrorist experts here in Sweden, where I live, where they claim that Al Qaeda is basically a Sunday school compared to Daesh or IS, which is nonsense. It had nothing to do with the sheer amount of brutality that ISIL was using, because Al Qaeda use it too. They decapitate heads, okay? They run car bombs into markets. They kidnap. They put people in slavery. Whatever. They do all these things as well, okay? Act as if like Al Qaeda is some sort of, humanitarian organization, right? But anyway, where was I? All right, here we go. By January 2014, hostile rhetoric between ISIL and al-Nusra Front escalated into violent conflict. Al-Nusra Front formally cut all factional links to ISIL, and in February 2014, when Al-Qaeda's General Command issued an official statement disavowing and terminating all relations with ISIL, in July 2016, al-Nusra Front under Julani split from Al-Qaeda, rebranding as Jabhat Fatah al-Sham. Okay, so he split from Al-Qaeda in 2016. Interesting. Al-Nusra Front, Jabhat Fatah al-Sham, cooperated with Ahrar al-Sham through most of 2015-2016, leading Ahrar al-Sham cleric Abu Jaber saw al-Nusra affiliation to al-Qaeda as detrimental to their cause. He also sought to unify Islamist rebel factions. He led a more Islamist and less nationalist faction within Ahrar al-Sham, Jaish al-Ahrar, which supported a merger with Jabhat Fateh al-Sham. There were merger talks in late 2016, but these broke down in early 2017. Jaish al-Ahrar crashed with rival Islamist groups in Idlib, particularly Ahrar al-Sham, before separating from Ahrar al-Sham to merge with Jabhat Fateh al-Sham in a new body. Yeah. I think you guys get the gist of how Jabhat al-Nusra was formed, its background, and so forth. Now, media is trying to polish its image, Western media in particular, and Al Jazeera. So keep that in mind. Yeah, I think we can move forward. If you guys want to read more, you can do it on your own. Because if I'm going to read this whole thing, it's going to take a long time. But anyway, this is their leader, Ahmad al-Shara. And as you can see, they put a suit and tie on him and fixed his beard and made him look like a modern man. But anyway, Ahmad Hussein al-Shara, born in 1982, also known by his nom de guerre, Abu Muhammad al-Julani, is a Syrian revolutionary military commander and politician who has been widely regarded as the de facto leader of Syria since 2024. As the emir of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, since 2017, he played a key role in the 2024 Syrian opposition offensives, which led to the downfall of the Assad regime and established of the Syrian transitional government. So he's born in Saudi. Al-Shara was born in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, to a Syrian family from the Golan Heights, hence where the name comes from, Al-Julani, right? Shortly before the 2003 invasion of Iraq, he joined Al-Qaeda in Iraq and fought for 3 years in the Iraqi insurgency. American forces captured and imprisoned him from 2006 to 2011. His release coincided with the Syrian revolution, and he created the Al-Nusra Front in 2012 with the support of Al-Qaeda to take part of the Syrian civil war against the Ba'athist government of Bashar al-Assad. As emir of the Al-Nusra Front, al-Shara built a stronghold in the northwestern Idlib governorate and opposed Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi's attempt to integrate al-Nusra into the Islamic State. This dispute led to open conflict between al-Nusra and the Islamic State. Yes. Looks like al-Shara played his cards right. But anyway, the U.S. State Department listed al-Shara as a specially designated global terrorist in May 2013, and 4 years later announced a $10 million reward for information leading to his capture. The reward offer was rescinded in December 2024 after al-Shara met with American delegation led by Assistant Secretary of State of Near Eastern Affairs Barbara A. Leaf. In 2016, al-Shara cut all al-Nusra ties with al-Qaeda, merging it with other organizations to form Hayat Tahrir al-Sham the following year. Since breaking with al-Qaeda, he has sought international legitimacy by focusing on governance in Syria rather than global jihadist goals. HTS established an administration in the territory it controls, collecting taxes, providing public services, issuing identity cards to residents, though it has faced criticism for authoritarian tactics and suppressing dissent. In recent years, he has presented a more moderate view of himself, suggesting he has no urge to wage a war against Western nations and has a vow to protect Syria's minorities, which is complete horseshit, right? There are videos circulating, especially on Telegram, where Alawites and Christians are being persecuted. Many are being executed, humiliated, So yeah, it's also, a lot of these foreign elements that have come to Syria, the Chechens, the Central Asians, and the Uyghurs and whatnot. They are also very militant. They have done a lot of the damage that is being perpetrated against minority groups right now. But anyway, his family background, I think we can stop from there, and then you pretty much have a gist of about HTS and Al-Julani. But anyway, Al-Shara's family came from the Golan Heights in Syria and were displaced in 1967 after the Israeli occupation during the Six-Day War. The Nisbah Al-Julani in his nom de guerre is a reference to the Golan Heights. Al-Shara's father, Hussein Ali Al-Shara, was an Arab nationalist student activist for the Nasrists in Syria who studied economics in the University of Baghdad before becoming an oil engineer. He has published numerous books on regional economic development. Al-Shara's father, Hussein, is the cousin of Farouk Al-Shara, vice president of Syria from 2006 to 2016. Also, his uncle is married to Farouk's aunt. His paternal grandfather, Ali Muhammad Al-Shara, was a large landowner tradesman in the city of Fiqh, which is where exactly? Okay, yeah. His great-grandfather, Muhammad Khalid al-Shara, played a significant role in the Great Syrian Revolt against the French occupation of Syria. He was sentenced to death and abstainia for his involvement in the revolt, though the sentence was never carried out. So interesting. His father was a Nasserite, a Nasserist, basically. And I told you before that Syria is an artificial country. There was a power struggle between the Ba'athists and the Nasserists and basically the Muslim Brotherhood, right? And the Ba'athists came out victorious on that front. So, yes, but this is a little bit about him and his background and where he come from and whatnot. And I think we can move on to perhaps the Turkestan Islamic movement, which is mainly Uyghur dominated. And the next group I would like to talk about is Turkestan Islamic Party. This is a Uyghur dominated party. Well, not party, but guerrilla force party, whatever we're going to call it. It was also under the name of ETIM, which is the East Turkestan Islamic Movement. So it has kind of changed names. It was active in, Xinjiang, China, during the, I think it was the 1990s and early 2000s, where they conducted a bunch of terrorist attacks, and also they had some activities during the 2010s. But yeah, we can talk about that a little bit after we summarize this article a little bit. So, the Turkestan Islamic Party, TIEP or TIP, is a Uyghur Islamic militant organization founded in Pakistan by Hassan Mahsoum. Its stated goals are to establish an Islamic state in Xinjiang in Central Asia. The Chinese government asserts that the TIP is synonymous with the East Turkestan Islamic Movement, ETIM, as we talked about. ETIM has been described by scholars as demanding total independence and supporting or being indifferent to more radical methods driven by religious and ethnic motives. Influenced by the success of the Afghan Mujahideen against the Soviets in the Soviet-Afghan War, the ETIP later became known as TIP in 2001 and was established in September 1997 by Hassan Mahsoum in Pakistan. After 11th of September 2001, the Chinese regime strove to include its repression of Uyghur opposition within the international dynamic of the struggle against Islamic terrorist networks. Their slogans contained anti-communist rhetoric and calls for uniting Turks, indicating a movement akin to Islamic pan-Turkism, historically congruent with southern Xinjiang rather than pure radical Salafi jihadism or religious extremism. The revolt lasted several days and was put down by the Chinese government, which deployed significant forces to suppress the insurrection. The Chinese government viewed them as a jihadist movement akin to the Mujahideen in Afghanistan across the border, which gave birth to the more radical movements such as the Party of Allah and the Islamic movement of East Turkestan. The Syrian branch of the TIP is active in the Syrian civil war and are largely grouped in Idlib. Well, there you go. And this group was removed from the list of terrorism by Mike Pompeo, I believe, in 2019. And it has been used as a proxy to sabotage the Belt and Road Initiative, along with other groups in the region. For instance, Xinjiang holds a very important role in the BRI because this is where Chinese infrastructure projects cross over into Pakistan, Afghanistan, and into Central Asia, but also to the Middle East. And obviously, the CIA, they want to sabotage this because America wants to maintain its economic hegemony across the world. They don't like the fact that China is the next superpower. And they have cooked up this bogus story of Uyghur genocide in Xinjiang, when this is clearly not the case. Has there been history of repression and discrimination? Of course, I don't deny that. But genocide, absolutely not. And I'll tell you why. The birth rates among Uyghurs are like 6 times higher than that of Han Chinese. They have, among other minorities, they also have almost what you can compare to the American thing. What's it called? Not DEI, affirmative action almost, right? To come into universities and education and whatnot. On top of that, there's like 30,000 mosques in this area. The language is written is used on the currency. Like I've never seen that in other minority groups. And on top of it, if there was a genocide among Uyghurs, we would have seen millions of refugees just crossing the borders to Kazakhstan and other Central Asian countries and whatnot, and Pakistan for that matter. So this is all nonsense. There are other Muslim groups in China as well. There's Huis, which are basically Han Chinese Muslims that have intermarried with Arab and Persian traders. But they do not. I've never heard anybody from their community talk about them being genocided, right? Same with Tajik minorities and certain other Turkic groups. So, no, they're specifically using this group, Uyghurs, and I'm not saying all Uyghurs are down with this. There's a specific extremist subset within their community that have been radicalized. Many of them have fought in Afghanistan. They have fought in as they said, in Syria, right? And I am sure the Chinese intelligence is keeping a close eye on what's going on in Syria with these radicalized Uyghurs. But anyway, earlier groups, Abdul Hamid, Abdul Aziz Makhdoom, and Abdul Hakim Makhdoom launched the Hizbul Islam li Turkistan, Islamic Party of Turkestan, or Turkestan Islamic Movement in the 1940s. They were killed, imprisoned, or driven underground by China by the late 1950s. I think that was a typo. After being set free from prison in 1979, Abdul Hakim Makhdoom instructed Muhammad Amin Jan and other Uyghurs in his version of Islam. The East Turkestan Islamic Party, ETIAP, was organized in Pakistan by Hassan Mahsoum and Abdul Qadir Yapugwan in September 1997. In 1998, Mahsoum moved to ETIP, which China claims to be ETIM's headquarters, to Kabul, taking shelter under Taliban-controlled Afghanistan. The leader, Hassan Mahsoum, was killed by a Pakistani raid on a suspected Al-Qaeda camp in South Waziristan in 2003. leading to the group's collapse. However, ETIP resurged after the Iraq War inflamed Mujahideen sentiment. The group was mentioned again in 2007 when China announced that it raided militants in Aktu County. ETIM received material support from the Taliban and had links to Pakistani Taliban, Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan, which is TTP, which is a conflict that is now resurged again, by the way. Maybe we should talk about that at some other point. But anyway, prompting China to urge Pakistan to take action against the militants in 2009. And Uyghurs were actually some of the most vicious, radicalized fighters in ISIS and in Jabhat al-Nusra or in Syria as well. Very dangerous. But anyway, from ETIP to TIP, the organization called itself Turkestan Islamic Party to reflect its new domain and abandoned usage of the ETIP, although China still calls it by the name ETIM. The Turkestan Islamic Party was originally subordinated to the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan, because there's a lot of Uzbeks as well in this. They are fighting in Syria. Split off and declared the name as TIP and started making itself known to be promoting itself with its Islamic Turkestan magazine and Voice of Islam media in China, in Chinese, Arabic, Russian, and Turkish, in order to reach out to global jihadists. Control over the Uyghur and Uzbek militants was transferred to the Pakistani Taliban from the Afghan Taliban after 2001. So violence against the militants' countries of origins can no longer be restrained by the Afghan Taliban, since the Pakistani Taliban does not have a stake in doing so. In 2013, the group announced it was moving fighters to Syria. Its profile in China and even Afghanistan and Pakistan has decisively waned since then, while in Syria it has risen. And we also have to remember in Afghanistan, the activity has also waned because Afghanistan right now, with the new Taliban regime, is doing a lot of trade with China. So obviously, they cannot house these terrorists and allow them to train and commit attacks inside of China, or inspire people to commit attacks in China, right? That would be very counterintuitive for their developmental strategy of Afghanistan. But anyway, Al-Qaeda links. The TIP has links to Al-Qaeda and affiliated groups such as the Islamic Movement of Afghanistan and the Pakistani Taliban. The U.S. has designated it as having received training and financial assistance from Al-Qaeda. And you guys, by the way, because the CIA allowed a bunch of these Uyghurs to be transferred out of Guantanamo prison and be basically let loose in Syria, right? And other places in order to sabotage Chinese infrastructure and the economy of Xinjiang. Anyway, University of Virginia Associate Professor Philip B.K. Potter wrote in 2013 that even though throughout the 1990s, Chinese authorities went to great lengths to publicly link organizations active in Xinjiang, including the ETIM, to Al-Qaeda, the best information indicates that before 2001, the relationship included some training, funding, but relatively little operational cooperation. Meanwhile, specific incidents were downplayed by Chinese authorities as isolated criminal acts. However, in 1998, the group's headquarters were moved to Kabul in Taliban-controlled Afghanistan, while China's ongoing security crackdown in Xinjiang has forced the most militant Uyghur separatists into a volatile neighboring countries such as Pakistan, Potter writes, where they are forging strategic alliances and even leading jihadist factions affiliated with Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. And Pakistan is a very interesting country in this regard because China's BRI project goes through Pakistan. They are building a lot of new things in the port in Karachi area and the Baluchistan area, right? And there's other groups there, such as I think it's called Baluchi BLA, Baluchi Liberation Army, right? Or Baluch Liberation Army. And they have conducted murders and kidnappings of Chinese engineers and so forth. But this movement, the BLA, is more of a Marxist or socialist leaning or nationalist leaning. I know they're secular. It's a movement that I definitely have to look more into eventually. But yeah. Anyway. However, according to the US Treasury, TIP member Abdul Haq al Turkistani joined Al Qaeda's Majlis Ashura Executive Leadership Council in 2005, and TIP member Abdul Shakur Turkistani was appointed military commander of its forces in the federally administrated tribal areas of Pakistan. Abdul Haq was considered sufficiently influential by the Al Qaeda leadership that he served as a mediator between rival Taliban factions and played a role in military planning. In the 2010s, TIP's relationships to Al Qaeda was still contested, but they became more closely aligned, and TIP leader Head Abdul Haq confirmed loyalty to Al Qaeda in May 2016. In 2014, according to site intelligence group, the Al Qaeda aligned Al Fajr Media Center began to distribute TIP promotional material, placing it in the jihadist mainstream. The East Turkestan Independence Movement was endorsed in the serial Islamic Spring's ninth release by Ayman al-Zawahiri in 2016. Zawahiri confirmed that the Afghanistan war after 9/11 included the participation of Uyghurs, and the jihadists like Zarqawi, bin Laden, and the Uyghur Hassan Mahsoum were provided with refuge together in Afghanistan under Taliban rule. This was before the Bishkek Chinese embassy bombing. The Turkestan Islamic Party slammed and attacked Assad, Russia, NATO, and the United States and other Western countries in its propaganda outlets such as the Islamic Turkestan magazine and its Telegram channel. We can skip the Afghanistan part because we gotta wrap it up a little bit. But anyway, Syria. So ETIM or TIP sent the Turkestan Brigade, Katiba Turkistani, also known as Turkestan Islamic Party in Syria, to take part in the Syrian civil war as part of the network of Al-Qaeda-linked groups alongside al-Nusra, most notably in the 2015 Jisr al-Shukur offensive, where they were part of the Army of Conquest coalition. They have been described as well-organized, experienced, and as having an important role in offensives against President Bashar al-Assad's forces in northern regions. All right. So yeah. But we can go through this last one though. The ideology, the NIFA Foundation. Because I know the TIP, they say it's a Salafist movement, right? Which is true. But they've also incorporated what seems to be some form of pan-Turkism as well. Anyway, the NIFA Foundation, an American terrorist analyst foundation, translated and released a jihadist article from ETIM, whose membership, it is said, consisted primarily of Uyghur Muslims from Western China. The TIP's primary goal is the independence of East Turkestan. ETIM continues this theme of contrasting Muslims and Chinese in a 6-minute video in 2008, where Commander Saifullah warns Muslims not to bring their children to the 2008 Summer Olympics, and also saying do not stay on the same bus, on the same train, or the same plane, in the same building, or any place the Chinese are. Clearly a very racist movement as well. But there you go, ladies and gentlemen. This is, and as you can see, the United States has not designated this as a terrorist group anymore. So, this is how it is. All right. And a very famous group is also the Islamic State. The Islamic State, or IS, was also known as ISIS, which is the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, Islamic State of Iraq and Levant, and blah, blah, blah. It had many different names, right? The Arabic acronym is Daesh, or Dawlat al-Islamiyya. And it claimed global prominence in 2014 when its militants conquered large territories in northwestern Iraq and Syria, taking advantage of the ongoing civil war in Syria and the disintegrating local military forces of Iraq. By the end of 2015, its self-declared caliphate ruled an area with a population of about 12 million, where they enforced their extremist interpretation of Islamic law, managed an annual budget exceeding of 1 billion US dollars, and commanded more than 30,000 fighters. And a lot of these revenues of income was oil, and they probably sold that to Turkey or Turkey. Anyway, after a grinding conflict with American, Iraqi, and Kurdish forces, IS lost control of all its Middle Eastern territories by 2019, subsequently reverting to insurgency from remote hideouts while continuing its propaganda efforts. These efforts have garnered a significant following in northern and Sahelian Africa, where IS still controls a significant territory. Not just Sahelian Africa, but groups such as, what's the name? Al-Shabaab. Yes, they've also pledged allegiance to Daesh or IS. So, originating in the Jaish al-Taifa al-Mansura, founded by Abu Umar al-Baghdadi in 2004, the organization, primarily under the Islamic State of Iraq, affiliated itself with Al-Qaeda in Iraq and fought alongside them during the 2003 and 2006 phase of the Iraqi insurgency. The group later changed their name to... sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but it's been a rough night. Anyway, the group later changed their name to the Islamic State of Iraq and Levant for about a year before declaring itself to be a worldwide caliphate called simply the Islamic State, Al-Dawla al-Islamiyya. As a caliphate, U.S. demanded the religious, political, and military obedience of Muslims worldwide. Despite the rejection of its legitimacy by mainstream Muslims and its statehood by the United Nations and most governments. During its rule in Syria and Iraq, the group became notorious for its brutality. Under its rule of these regions, IS launched genocides against Yazidis, Iraqi Turkmen. You have to remember, the Iraqi Turkmen are actually majority Shia, whilst the Syrian Turkmen are majority Sunni, hence why they all fought against the Assad government. But anyway, engaged in persecution of Christians, Shia Muslims, Mandaeans, publicized videos of beheadings of soldiers, journalists, aid workers, and destroyed several cultural sites. The group has perpetrated terrorist massacres in territories outside of its control, such as November 2015 Paris attack, 2024 Kerman bombings in Iran, and 2024 Crocus City Hall attack in Russia. And this is in Iran and Russia, it was ISIS Khorasan. ISIS-K, I've heard from many analysts that the CIA flew in ISIS members into Afghanistan after the Taliban takeover, prior to the Taliban takeover, basically, because ISIS and the Taliban are opponents to one another. The Taliban has local ambitions and wants to rebuild its country and create some sort of Islamic emirate in Afghanistan, which they're doing, basically, right? But ISIS and other jihadist groups such as Al-Qaeda and these similar groups, they have more global, expansionist, ideas. And they only know war. They're almost like, you can compare them to the modern day Golden Horde of the Mongols back in the day. Yeah. So, after 2015, the Iraqi armed forces and the Syrian Democratic Forces pushed back IS and degraded its financial and military infrastructure, assisted by advisors, weapons, training, supplies, and airstrikes by American-led coalition, and later by Russian airstrikes, bombings, cruise missile attacks, and scorched earth tactics across Syria, which focused mostly on razing Syrian opposition strongholds. All right, now we can move on to the Syrian National Army. The Syrian National Army, SNA, also known as Turkish-backed Free Syrian Army, is a coalition of armed Syrian opposition groups that participates in the Syrian civil war, comprising various rebel factions that emerged at the start of the war in July 2011. It was officially established in 2017 under the auspices of Turkey, who provides funding, training, and military support. The SNA has its roots in the Free Syrian Army, a loose coalition of armed opposition groups founded on the 29th of July 2011 by defected Syrian military officers after Turkey formally condemned the regime of Bashar al-Assad in November 2011. It provided arms, training, and sanctuary to the FSA, initially the principal opponent of the Syrian government. The FSA was gradually weakened by infighting, lack of funding, and rival Islamist groups. In August 2016, Turkey began assembling a new coalition of Syrian rebel groups, which included many former FSA fighters, in an effort to create a more cohesive and effective opposition force. Following Operation Euphrates Shield, the Turkish government coordinated with the Syrian interim government to form a national army to secure Turkish territorial gains. The official aims of the SNA are to create a safe zone in northern Syria, consolidate with other rebel factions, and combat both Syrian government forces and Islamists. Its presence expanded to the neighboring Idlib governorate during the Syrian government's 2019 Northwestern Offensive, after which it incorporated the National Front for Liberation on 4th of October 2019. Closely aligned with the Turkish government, the SNA has been described as an auxiliary army of the Turkish armed forces, also as mercenaries by their critics. Outside Syria, the SNA fighters have been deployed by Turkey as proxy forces, for example, in conflicts from Libya to the South Caucasus. The SNA mostly consists of Arabs and Syrian Turkmen. The Sultan Murad Brigade has a lot of Syrian Turkmens. But yes, the the SNA now is basically a long arm of the Turkish government, and their neo-Ottoman ambitions. That's it. The FSA, as I said, it was weakened. Even in the article that I read about the Libyan gun trader, when he had discussions with certain Syrian opposition people, even they said that the Free Syrian Army, these Syrian guys, basically they are a joke. They're corrupt. They don't have the discipline and so forth, like the Islamist opposition do. But I disagree with some people when they say that, this is a, how should I say, moderate rebel group. It's not. There were plenty of, brigades that were extremely, sectarian in nature. The FSA was from 2011. Still is. But, yeah. Let's see here. There's a bunch of operations here. But yeah, they've been active in Libya, Azerbaijan, Niger, Iraq. We can read about the internal conflicts. On 26th of March 2016, Ahrar al-Sham ordered the anti-YPG Kurdish forces, Kurdish FSA group, Liwa Ahfad Saladin, to remove the flag of Kurdistan from their posts and threatened military action if they did not. However, Liwa Ahwad Saladin's commander denied the incident ever occurred and stated Ahrar al-Sham to be its ally. On the 27th of September 2016, several Ahrar al-Sham fighters publicly burned a FSA flag in Azaz, and Ahrar al-Sham spokesman denied involvement, and the incident sparked pro-FSA demonstrations in the city. On 14th of November 2016, the Levant Front and the Sultan Murad Division, and I've spoken about this one before, but anyway, clashed at the Azaz border gate with Kilis, Turkey. Ahrar al-Sham and the Nur al-Din al-Zinki movement, a former member of the Levant Front, joined the fighting after they said the Levant Front leaders was acting like gangs. So you see, there is a lot of infighting between certain Syrian opposition groups, and hence why people have predicted that the Syrian issue is going to be a headache for the next years to come. Many predict a Libyan-style type of outcome, where different militia groups and so forth will wage war against each other. I mean, we're already seeing it to a certain extent with because the SNA and other groups are now fighting against the Kurds in Manbij and other places, and it's a total shit show, as they say. But you get the gist of it. Some of their war crimes are also written about here. But yeah, we can probably move on to the Syrian Democratic Forces. And this will be, I believe, the last of the groups that I will talk about. I'm sure there's quite a few more, but these are like the most relevant ones that I can see on the information space. But anyway, the Syrian Democratic Forces (SDF) is a Kurdish-led coalition of U.S.-backed left-wing ethnic militias and rebel groups, and serves as the official military wing of the Autonomous Administration of North and East Syria, also unofficially known as Rojava. The SDF is allied to and supplied by the United States-led CGTF-OIR International Alliance. Founded on 10th of October 2015, the SDF claims that its mission is fighting to create a secular, democratic, and federalized Syria. The SDF is opposed by Turkey, who view the group as an extension of the Kurdistan Workers' Party, PKK, which it has designated as a terrorist group. Formed as a rebel alliance in the Syrian civil war, the SDF composed primarily of Kurdish, Arab, and Assyrian Syriac, as well as some smaller Armenian, Turkmen, and Chechen forces. Damn, they have Chechens in there? Interesting. I actually was watching a video with, what's her name? Syrian girl, Partisan. And yes, she has caught a lot of slack from her opponents. I get that. But she spits a lot of truth. When they say Turkmen and Chechen here, as well as some Arab, she actually brought up the fact that they had brought in certain Islamist elements, actually, to form some sort of strange alliance with these people. I'm sure these guys probably don't have as much to say as the predominantly secular Kurdish nationalists / socialists. I see them more as nationalists, in my opinion. There was a great article series on Mint Press that talked about the Kurdish-Israeli-U.S. pipeline and how one former U.S. soldier who had fought in the YPD talked about how revisionist their view of history is, that Kurds are somehow the type of the ethnic group that have pretty much civilized the Middle East, right? I have to look into that article a little bit more. It was a long time ago that I read it, but it's worth looking at actually, because the Kurds have been used as pawns. And I'm not saying it's only Kurds that have been used as pawns. Many groups in the Middle East have been used as pawns. Sunni Islamists, Kurdish nationalists, pan-Turkists, you name it. But we're speaking about the Kurdish nationalists at the moment. And for the disclaimer, I'm not saying all Kurdish people are Kurdish nationalists. Many of them have different political viewpoint backgrounds. Many of them actually joined. Some of them at least joined many of these Islamist groups. There are Kurdish fighters within ISIS, within the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. This is not uncommon. In fact, the offensive that was led against Kobani and these places, many of them were Kurdish Salafists. So it is not that uncommon to find. And it has obviously split the Kurdish community to a certain extent. You have people who fought with the Peshmerga, who fought against Daesh, and then you have Kurds who fight against the Peshmerga. And there are different reasons to this. Many Kurds, or some Kurds, feel that they have been sidelined by the secular Kurdish groups, whether that be the Kurdish regional government in Iraq, or let's say PKK. There's a lot of corruption, clan, politics that many Kurds perhaps don't agree with, and some of these disillusioned Kurds turn to an Islamist opposition or Islamist terrorist groups, so to speak. But less opponents. Let's see here. Where were we? It's military led by the People's Protection Units, YPG, a Kurdish militia which is designated as a terrorist group by both Turkey and Qatar. The SDF also includes several ethnic militias, various factions of Syrian opposition's Free Syrian Army. Opponents of the SDF includes various Islamist, Syrian nationalist, and pro-Turkish forces involved in the civil war. Major enemies include Al-Qaeda affiliates, the Islamic State of Iraq and Levant, the Syrian National Army, the Turkish Armed Forces, and their allies. Up to 2019, the SDF focused primarily on ISIL, successfully driving them from important strategic areas such as Al-Hawal, Shadadi, Tishrin Dam, Manbij, Al-Tabaqa, Tabqadam, Ba'athdam, and ISIL's former capital of Raqqa. In March 2019, the SDF announced the total territorial defeat of ISIL in Syria, with SDF taking control of the last stronghold in Baqus. Since the territorial defeat of ISIL, the SDF has increasingly been involved in combating the TFSA, that is to say the Syrian National Army, and a Turkish presence in northern Syria. And obviously Turkey has a beef with with Kurdish nationalists. But the problem is here that Turkey is a NATO country, and America is also supporting the Kurds. So there's a clash of interests here. But historically speaking, America has dumped the Kurds. They always use them, and then they throw them away, and that's it. YPG is also used as a proxy by Israel. It's kind of well known that political entities among the Kurds, many of them have had ties to Israel since like the 1950s. There's a image of Barzani with, I think it was one of the heads of Mossad or something like that, in the 60s or 70s. So very interesting indeed. But the SDF has actually contributed to the collapse of the Syrian state. They occupied, along with their American backers, illegally, may I add, because America was never invited by the Syrian government, but nonetheless, to occupy the oil-rich and fertile lands of Syria, which pretty much starved the country in terms of revenues, right? So, yeah. But they've had temporary or strategic alliances, perhaps we could call it, with the Syrian Arab Army to fight various Islamist opposition groups. Anyway, the establishment of the SDF was announced on 11th of October 2015 during a press conference in Al-Hasaka. The alliance built on long-standing previous cooperation between the founding partners, while the People's Protection Unit and the Women's Protection Unit had been operating throughout the regions of the autonomous administration of North and East Syria. The other founding partners were more geographically focused on the Euphrates region, where the YPG's partners in the Euphrates volcano joint operation room. Several mainstream Syrian rebel factions of the Free Syrian Army who had helped defend the Kurdish town of Kobani, during the siege of Kobani, Liwa Thawar al-Raqqa had been expelled by the al-Nusra Front and ISIL from the city of Raqqa for its alliance with the YPG. The group participated in the capture of Tel Abyad from the Islamic State, geographically focused on the Jazeera region in northeast Syria, where the Syrian Syriac Military Council. This is an interesting group. But yeah, they're pretty much irrelevant. I don't think they have a whole lot to fight right now. But unless they're still part of this alliance, then obviously they are still relevant in that sense. But there is actually a conflict or tensions between Syrian and Syriac communities and the Kurds in Iraq, for example. And I'm sure there's some in Syria as well. There has been many instances of Kurdish authorities stealing land from Christian Syrians. So I haven't looked in too much into that, but that's what I've seen sporadically on video and stuff like that. It's an interesting and tragic thing going on, if that is the case. But anyway, the Al-Sanandid forces of the Arab Shamar tribe, both of whom had cooperated with the YPG in fighting ISIL since 2013. The MFS is further politically aligned with the YPG via the shared secular ideology of democratic confederalism, which the Assyrian community is known as Tawarunya. Sorry if I butchered that name. I can't speak the Assyrian language. And Assyrians have a very rich culture. They're a very tight-knit community. But I've seen quite a few of them here in the West. Many of them are very Islamophobic. They're very pro-Zionist. Many of them are anti-Zionist. In that sense, they're split. They say we've been oppressed, which is true. They've been persecuted, but they celebrate the Assyrian Empire. Like, the Assyrian Empire was one of the most oppressive empires in history. So I kind of disagree with the whole anti-Islam thing. It's not like the Assyrians were treating their subordinates with kindness and love. So, Assyrians are not like unique in this sense in the Middle East when it comes to historical revisionism of their glorious past. I mean, Persians, Arabs, Turks, they're all known for doing this. The truth is rarely very black and white. It's a gray zone, right? But I think you guys get the gist of it. I'm not going to go through this whole article, obviously, but it's good to have an idea of all of these rebel groups, because it's a fucking mess out there, man. There's a lot of groups, but these are like the main staple that I want people to keep in mind. So yeah. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we have to round off this part 2, because the video is like 1 hour, maybe a little bit more, but around the 1 hour mark there. And I don't believe your attention span is that long. So in the third part, we're going to talk about the climate change / drought, the influx of perhaps Wahhabi money, the corruption, and all of this stuff that led to the rotting and breakdown of the Syrian state, basically. So stay tuned.